So I do like to have pleasantries and also just address framework of debate. Maybe it's just me personally, but hi everybody, Coach Castle here, Brick by Brick Bodybuilding. You guys know me if you're on my channel. If not, nice to meet you all. This is
I am Steven Daniele. I am the owner of Team Euphoric Health and Performance as well as Euphoric Physiotherapy. I've been training for 26 years, coaching for 22 years. So since 2004, I've been coaching. And I've been doing physiotherapy since 2010.
cool. I suppose a slight bit of background for me is specialized in biomechanics, biochemistry, biointegrity, neurological programming, and respiratory health. Take a multifaceted approach to health and wellness. Been coaching for 16 years, although I would say only coaching well for about 10 years. I know it sounds weird, but I'll put it that way. In context,
I pretty much say the same thing. I've been coaching for 22 years, but really I've been coaching well for about 16.
I mean, there's a big difference between when you get started and when you get into it. You know what I mean? You have to learn a lot more.
That actually is kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because with regard to you don't understand exercise. If you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise. That statement, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by it, because it almost sounds like you're treating biomechanics like it's a light switch and it's either on or off, where you either know biomechanics or you don't.
I understand. And we're going to get into the spectrum. I'm sure we'll talk about the spectrum there in a minute. But for clarity's sake, we met on Facebook via one of my many incendiary posts, which I drop frequently, by the way, just so you're aware. I don't know if you have any idea of my work or if you looked at what I do. But regularly, all I do, I'd say 95% of my work is just me posting basic educational videos about respiratory health, nutrition, biomechanics, etc., correct exercise form, these things. And these posts will be the most hated posts you can imagine, with nonstop emails. I've got death threats, etc., just for explaining things. Now, that is why I will drop particularly, let's say, incendiary things in these group settings, so I can reveal and expose what I determine and consider to be the many weaknesses in the fitness industry and why it is so screwed up. Let's just put it that way. Now, my goal is to educate people and change the way people think about health, wellness, and fitness, and stop how they think about it traditionally and instead think about it intelligently. And mostly that is met with contention and hate because of logical biases and cognitive fallacies, which people have, which are basically they're things like they don't know what they don't know. They're stuck in patterns of behavior. You guys get the idea. Now, in the context of this debate, I made a particular claim. That claim was what we'll be discussing. And the claim is, if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise. Now, that being said, that's the claim. So it's up to me to provide burden of proof is on me basically to defend the claim and explain what I mean by that, as well. As we've previously mentioned, not sure if we will include it or not. We were chatting a bit earlier. The claim itself perhaps is misunderstood, and that could also cause some contention. We seem to agree on quite a few things, so that's wonderful. And I'm sure either way, this will hopefully be a learning experience for both of us and you, which is the reason why I do these. I'd also like to congratulate you. As I check my YouTube, you're the first person out of the hundreds who have agreed to debate me publicly in a year and a half who has done so. So thank you for having the balls to do that. Most people run away screaming.
Yeah, so I also thank you for agreeing to this as well. I always enjoy a good debate, and also I have spent quite a bit of money on my education. So best case scenario, you completely embarrass me and I learned something for free instead of having to pay thousands of dollars.
That's how I look at it too. It's one of the reasons I love debates. There's no losing. There really isn't. Either you're proven wrong and you learn something, and you literally can show the next generation, hey, here's what it looks like when you're proven wrong, and change your stance. Or, you hopefully change the other person's mind, or at least the viewer's minds. Either way, it's hopefully a learning opportunity, and not like a political debate. There will hopefully be no over talking, no name calling, slandering, any of that nonsense. We don't do that. I don't do that. I mean, personally, I try to avoid it. But that being said, I think it's best if perhaps we just start with maybe me explaining the claim, or would you like to ask questions about it?
My clarifying questions with regard to the claim is, first, what level of biomechanical knowledge are you referring to when you say that you don't understand exercise without biomechanics? Are you talking about a 4-year-old who knows absolutely nothing. Like, I'll give myself as an example. So I started training in 2000, didn't really know too much. At the time, had dial-up internet. The only website where you could really get any information was bodybuilding.com, which was not exactly the greatest site looking back.
I love it though,
Yeah. Then in 2001, as one of my electives in high school, I ended up taking weightlifting. It was an actual weightlifting course, not just, you could either take regular gym or weightlifting. So I took weightlifting, learned a little bit more there. Then in grade 11, as one of my electives, I took exercise science. Fast forward to 2004, I started getting a little bit more involved. That's when I started getting into coaching. And then 2009, that's when I started learning from Paul Chek, Charles Poliquin, and Chris Frederick. I took all of their courses. So during each of those portions of my life, my knowledge of biomechanics was quite different. So at what point do you consider a sufficient amount of knowledge in biomechanics for someone to understand exercise? Because what I knew in 2000 versus 2001 versus 2002, 2004, and 2010 were wildly different.
Agreed. I actually, I don't think I could have given you a better question to ask me. That's a really great question about this. Thank you. So long story short, and I will attempt to keep this short. Anytime, ask for more details, please. But there are what I consider to be 16 principles of biomechanics, which to my knowledge, anyone from a 10-year-old up can learn very rapidly. Now, the reason I say that is because I've educated everyone from children to 90-year-olds, so it doesn't matter. The principles of the body stay the same. Now, when I'm happy to reference each one of these if you like, but I'll just give you a brief explanation. So, long story short, the body has rules that it follows. Now, biomechanics, by definition, is the study of how force interacts with living material. Now, in the context of exercise, just allow me a moment to just go through a few steps. It's probably easier if we just, for the viewers as well, to go through a couple steps, because these are what I want them to learn anyways. So this are, in a quick 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to explain just some of the things I want you guys to understand. So first thing to understand is that muscles never pull directly on the weight that you're lifting. They pull on a bone, and that bone has a joint, and that joint is attached to another bone. Now, the muscle's job is to essentially, via what's called muscle sliding theory, pull together. The fibers slide together via chemical interaction. So the muscle bunches up in the middle and not at one end or the other. And basically just move one bone together to the next. If you want to think about like a door on a hinge, and then you opening and closing the door, in this case, you would be the muscle opening and closing the door. So every muscle, skeletal muscle to be specific, follows this straight line principle. All muscles pull in a straight line. Muscles do not push. So if you would imagine I give you a box, I tie a rope to it, and I tell you to pull that box, you can pull it towards yourself. You can't push it away. You can't move to the left. You can't move it to the right. So now that we know muscles only pull in a straight line, the next question should be, well, do they have a best way to do that? And the answer is yes. And this is something called a resistance curve. And this would be the next step. And this is basically just how the levers are interacting with gravity, which will be either starting in a diminishing strength curve or ending in a diminishing strength curve, essentially. I mean, to keep it simple. Now, the next step would just be lever magnification. A lever magnification step, easy to understand, is if I gave you a 5-pound dumbbell, you would have no difficulty curling it. However, if I took the same 5-pound dumbbell, I attached it to a broomstick with a piece of duct tape, I gave you the other side of the broomstick, and I told you to pick it off the ground, suddenly you wouldn't be able to pick it up off the ground. Lever magnification, instead of having a 12-inch lever, the bicep is now lifting considerably more load because it's more like an 80-inch lever. So that actually changes the amount of load being delivered to the bicep. It's not the weight you're holding, it's the lever magnification principle, as well as how those levers interact with gravity. Now, I know that might sound complicated, but this is a very brief synapse, and that's basically that, and then 3 more simple things you have to understand. Muscles have opposing muscle groups. So muscles only pull, as previously mentioned, which means they're going to have an opposing muscle group to pull the other way. So think bicep, tricep, front delt, rear delt, lateral delt, latissimus dorso, abs, erector spinalis, hamstrings, quads. They all have opposites. Now, if, for example, if you're overtraining one and undertraining one, what's going to happen is your body is going to be collapsing in a particular direction. It's unavoidable. and then certain neurological phenomena, such as passive insufficiency, active insufficiency. These are phenomena which occur when the muscle is either pre-shortened or pre-contracted before the movement and even passing through the resistance curve. So that's a problem. Something called bilateral deficit, which occurs when you use a shared implementation. Also closed, kind of like a closed chain movement, where basically you're using a barbell or a push-up position, etc. If you have a lagging muscle group, you're basically not going to be able to generate as much force on the side. It's going to keep lagging on that side. Furthermore, total force compensation is going to be reduced. On top of that, you're not going to be able to take advantage of something called crossover or carryover education, which is what occurs when you train one side and then you train the other side. Because of fascial lines in neurological programming, you actually get stimulus to the opposing side whether you trained it or not. So you actually get a net benefit by training unilaterally instead of bilaterally. Now, again, there's other principles and things to understand. Might sound complicated, but when you put it in practice, it's very simple to understand. Now, I actually teach every single one of my clients all of these principles. They understand all of them simply. It usually takes less than a month to teach them all of these principles, even just, again, people who are not, they're not athletes. And that's because it's not about teaching them with words. I regrettably don't have any implementation with me at the moment, but I have a lot of different ways that I teach people, which are very useful and they stick. So in essence, for biomechanics, you have to have a rudimentary knowledge of 16 principles. And with those 16 principles, you also have to know, give or take, 24 muscles of your anatomy. You don't have to know their names. You just have to know where they are. And that's literally it. And if you know those things, which also, by the way, include things like principles of hypertrophy and principles of biotensegrity, or how your body balances itself. Now, if you know those things, you never again need a gym unless you want to go to one. You'll never need a personal trainer. You'll never guess about exercises. You'll never not make progress. You'll never plateau. As long as your hormones and nutrition, etc., caveat, are on point, obviously, then that won't happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it still doesn't really answer the question that I asked at the beginning, which is what exactly is a sufficient amount of knowledge in biomechanics? So you explained the 16 different principles, but within each of those 16 principles, there's also different levels. So, for example,
okay, gotcha.
You mentioned the muscles pulling in a straight line.
Yep.
With regard to a knowledge of biomechanics, you can still understand when I take two dumbbells and do this, I'm training the chest without understanding the concept of the muscles pulling in a straight line. The other 100%. Thing too is with regard to the active and passive insufficiency, those are good concepts to understand, particularly if you are coaching professional athletes. Myself, I coach athletes as well as I have a physiotherapy clinic, so it's beneficial for me to know. But it's not really clear to me that a deep understanding of active and passive insufficiency is required for training Gen Pop if they are looking to just build a little bit of muscle, lose a little bit of fat. With regard to the bilateral limb deficit, again, it's a useful concept to understand, but I don't know how applicable it is in all settings. So, for example, if you are coaching an athlete that requires a lot of power in their sport, then yes, it's very useful to understand that. However, if you are just looking to coach somebody to either improve their movement a little bit, you want to get them a little bit stronger, you want to improve one of their athletic abilities, right? They want to get either improve their speed, strength, power, endurance, flexibility, agility, coordination, balance. None of the things that you mentioned require a deep understanding of those 16 principles in order for you to teach a Gen Pop person. So when you say that you need to understand biomechanics, what is the bare minimum threshold that somebody needs to understand for you to consider them somebody that knows exercise?
Okay, so the way I'm looking at this, we can approach this two ways. Way number one, we can go through kind of individually what I just talked about and explain each one of them. Or way two, I can explain what happens if you don't have this knowledge.
Let's do both of them at the same time. Let's go through the 16 different principles.
Sure.
We'll discuss one at a time rather than trying to cover all 16, because otherwise it's going to be all over the place. And then we could also explain what happens if you do or do not understand.
I'll even do you one better. Let's just do 10. Let's do 10.
Okay. Which one do you want to start with?
To be fair, you don't need all 16. I'll say you don't need all 16. If you care about health, you should know all 16. If you don't care about health and you're not teaching health, you don't need to know all 16. I'll put it that way.
I would argue that even the biomechanics, again, if you are the higher the level of the person that you are coaching, the more you're going to need to know. But I would argue that
I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, the level of understanding that you need is going to be dependent on the amount of information required to help the individual achieve the goal that they are coming to you for. So if somebody is coming to me because they have adhesive capsulitis, I'm going to need to know all of the structures that are surrounding that specific area. I'm going to have to know things like I'm going to have to know adequate ranges of motion at the shoulder joint. I'm going to have to know what exactly something like, for example, if you take a look at the scapulohumeral rhythm, I'm going to have to know what like that 30 degrees is the setting phase, and if they're going a little bit later, a little bit early, I'm going to need to stretch certain muscles, strengthen certain muscles. If somebody's coming to me and they just want to lose 5-10 pounds, they want to gain a little bit of muscle, I could, or even if they just want to improve their movement, I could just observe what they do in day-to-day life, and then with no understanding of biomechanics whatsoever, I can still come up with an effective exercise program. So for example, let's say I have a factory worker who picks up a lot of boxes. I could look at the pattern and just through pattern recognition realize, okay, they pick stuff up off the ground and lift it up. I want you to go to the gym or even come to my place, and I'm going to give you a plyo box. I'm going to have you pick that up. And then when that becomes easy, I'm going to add weight to it and keep picking it up. If I have a baker who lifts heavy bags of flour up and overhead without understanding the anterior deltoid or without understanding what the triceps are doing, I can understand that a bag of flour looks very similar to a sandbag. So I'm going to give you a sandbag. I'm going to have you pick it up overhead, put it on a shelf. And then as that becomes easier, I'm going to just increase the load to make it easier for you. So even without understanding any biomechanics whatsoever, I could just through pattern recognition come up with effective exercises for somebody, even though I can't explain the biomechanics behind it. Just by looking at the pattern, it's like, okay, you pick boxes up off the ground, I'm going to have you pick up similar objects off the ground. You place heavy objects overhead, I'm going to have you take similar objects and place those overhead.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's do one of these real quick. So I don't know if you are aware of this or a lot of our viewers are aware of this, but typically in debates, something occurs which is called straw manning. Now, straw manning essentially is where your opponent takes the argument you are presenting and then they misrepresent it and then they attack the misrepresentation that they created. Now, as we previously mentioned, I think debates are a learning platform. So I have no interest in those tactics. So I would like to do the opposite. I'd like to do the opposite. I want to steel man your argument. So I'm gonna give you kind of like in a good healthy relationship. I'm gonna give you back what you just said to me, and I'm gonna try to make sure you agree with me 100% that I see your point of view, that we're on point here. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
All right. So let's say you are the a random person's been going to the gym. You know, you've seen fitness magazines, YouTube videos. You know how to work out.
Yeah.
Not even a personal trainer. Just guy who knows how to work out, doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
His buddy, who's a complete mess. And when I say a mess, everybody, you know what I mean. Like a droopy posture, they're a warehouse worker, their lower back always hurts. We all know someone like this, okay? This is the type of person you're referring to, I'm sure. Now, his buddy can absolutely say, come in here to the gym with me. I can see your problem right here. You're not lifting with your legs. So that's causing all the lower back pain. You know, we're going to teach you how to lift properly. You know what else we're going to do? is because I can also tell because of this, you haven't been training your glutes and they're really left out. That's causing some problems. I can just see that. We're going to also train your glutes and we're going to get you on this program and it's going to make your warehouse life a lot better. We're going to get you a back brace and we're going to get you moving and walking and maybe some stretching and mobility. I mean, whatever. There's no such thing as like bad stretching or mobility. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff. So he's not even a personal trainer. I mean, would you agree with me that this guy is doing good for his friend? I would think he's doing good for his friend. I'm agreeing he's doing good for his friend.
Generally, I mean,
what would you add to it? What would you change?
In terms of what they are doing in that specific instance, like you explain, like
in this example,
the person in that specific scenario that you were giving, they at least had a very their knowledge of biomechanics.
Well, they don't have
I would say it's going to be. Sorry,
they don't have any. They just know you're not supposed to lift with your back. You're supposed to lift with your legs. That's all. And they're fixing their phone.
So that's what I kind of want to get to. It's like what is the bare minimum threshold for somebody to understand exercise?
But I'm just agreeing with you. Would you agree that this is a good example to support your case?
I would go one step further and say, like even below that level, like just
okay. Go.
So somebody knows even less than that. Somebody doesn't even know about activating the glutes or bracing or anything like that. You could still understand exercise, not to the level of a physiotherapist or not to the level of an Olympic coach. So, but that's what I'm trying to get at is what exactly is your bare minimum threshold.
I just want to make sure that we're clear about this scenario. Like we're clear on this. Okay. Now, I am not disagreeing that in this scenario, his friend is helping him. I have no disagreement. There's no disagreement here. His friend is absolutely helping him. Does his friend in this scenario have any knowledge of biomechanics? No, none, zip, zero, nada. Is he helping his friend? Yes, he absolutely, in some capacity, I don't know what the scale here would be, but in some capacity, he's assisting his friend. So full agreement on that. Here is my problem with this. Well, there's a lot of them. 1 second. So I'm trying to organize my thoughts. So number one, in this scenario, using one of the principles I've previously mentioned, because the friend who is attempting to help his friend is unaware of training opposing muscle groups, the assistance he is trying to render his friend is more than likely going to make the problem worse over time. So in the moment, it might seem great he's exercising. However, it's more than likely counterproductive just from the perspective of his, even if he's just telling his friend, lift with your legs, not your back. Because he's unaware of opposing muscle groups and his friend does not do exercise, he's a warehouse worker, and he tells him to strengthen his legs and keep his back vertical, this is going to cause all kinds of problems to his rib cage, to his pelvis, to his spine. Now, I don't know if you want me to elaborate in detail about these things, but it will. Now, in the short term, again, he's going to make some progress in the short term, which, again, is good. It's beneficial. I'm not decrying that. I'm just saying it will lead to a large number of problems.
But see, this is where, so I think this is where we start to get into a little bit of a disagreement, because right now you're giving a very specific scenario of somebody that may have some type of underlying pathology that needs to be addressed. And you would need a specific amount of knowledge in biomechanics to address that specific person. But
he has no underlying issues. He's a warehouse worker who doesn't exercise. That's it. No underlying issues.
You mentioned though that unless I'm mistaken, you mentioned that he has some type of pain.
Because he's a warehouse worker. I mean, statistically speaking, 70 to 80% of them have lower back pain.
So again. I'm talking about, like, when you say if you don't understand biomechanics, your knowledge of biomechanics is going to be dependent on the type of individual that you're trying to help and the goal that they have. So for somebody that has low back pain, you're going to have to understand more than for somebody that has no pain whatsoever. They're just looking to lose a little bit of fat, gain a little bit of muscle.
Exactly.
For example,
Exactly. But here's the thing. So unless we go through each, like I think we need to try to keep it more generalized. I'm happy to get specific, but I think we need to keep it more generalized, because otherwise we will need to just continuously go through specific examples while I keep showing you that if you don't have biomechanical knowledge in this scenario, it's not going to be good.
But that is why my definition for with regard to if you don't understand biomechanics, it is relative to the person in front of you. So the more demanding the case, the more knowledge you're going to need in biomechanics.
Okay, so I would say, but if we're going to go with a definition of any human being in front of you, then I would like literally claim any human being from a baby to a 100-year-old centurion. If the claim exists, I still hold this to be true, and I'll explain in just one moment. The claim is, if you do not understand biomechanics, you do not understand exercise. Now, definitionally speaking, excuse me, understand is, as you know, you guys all know understand means to understand. Biomechanics, study of how living force affects living material. Now, that's definitionally true. Now, exercise is by definition the adaptation of the human body to stimulus or force. Now, that's exactly what the study of biomechanics is. Now, there is no scenario I can think of where if you do not understand these, at least let's just say these 10 principles, you will not be, let's just say, functionally counterproductive. Does that make sense? So for example,
it's not about what, again, though, you're kind of treating biomechanics like an on or off switch where you either know or you don't, but there's different levels. So, for example, let's say my knowledge in biomechanics is so minimal that all I know is when I do this, this muscle works. I don't know what this muscle is called. I don't know what this joint movement is called. All I know is when I do this, this muscle works. Versus knowing that the long head of the biceps brachii is responsible, it attaches the glenohumeral joint in the elbow. It's responsible for shoulder flexion at the shoulder joint. At the elbow joint is responsible for flexion plus supination. So
I'll put it this way. When I am satisfied, because when I have a client, I don't ever want to have a client forever. That's a horrible thing to me. It means I'm a terrible coach. I want to have a client until they're well educated, and then they're good to go on their own. And if that's the case, I've done a damn good job as a coach. I don't ever want somebody to be handcuffed to me. So that being said, frequently I'll need to kick chicks out of the nest a little bit, if you will. So what happens is when I'm satisfied that they understand thoroughly these things, I'm happy. I mean, that's just, as you previously mentioned, my level of satisfaction. So what I had previously mentioned, and I'll just say 10, because frequently it's not all 16, frequently it's just 10. So I would say these 10 things. Now, when I say that, because I already know what you're going to say, when I say that these 10 things involve the person, for all intents and purposes, knowing 24 muscle groups, knowing how to move those joints attached to those muscle groups through full range of motion, and understanding correct posture and breathing. I mean, that's literally in summary. Now, those are not the personal trainers I train. Those are not the athletes I train. Those are regular people from teenagers to 90, regular old people. Nobody, they don't want specific knowledge from me. These people don't even come to me to be educated. It's just part of my coaching, and I insist that I personally am happy that you know these things. Now,
okay, again, so let's say I come to you, and
if I could I just want to add one thing I think is important.
Okay, go ahead.
This is also, I think, important. They don't necessarily know any of the names of these things.
Okay.
So they don't have to know the names. They have to know the movement. They have to understand the reason, but they don't have to know the names. They don't have to understand the principles deeply. They just have to know, kind of like, how a wedge, how a wedge works,
Yeah.
Like they have to have that level of understanding. They know the principle. This is what a wedge does. They
So
get
that's
like
see, so
principle.
based off of that definition, though, you're pretty much almost everybody knows exercise then, because unless you're a 4-year-old who knows none of these concepts whatsoever, like
Well, that's where we
anybody
get
that
to the
comes to
rub in the
me,
middle.
like you'll
Well,
know
that's the
this
problem.
trade. Sorry.
But that's exactly the problem, though. Is in 16 years of me publicly writing books, articles, YouTube videos, and debating publicly, I
Mhm.
have met hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of personal trainers, debated, I don't know how many of them, hundreds of elite athletes, IFBB bodybuilders, professional body, you name it. And
Mhm.
none of them understood more than 2 or 3 of these principles tops. Tops. And I mean tops. And my problem, if I can summarize my problem with a metaphor, and this is exactly, and I'm not trying to market here, I want to be clear with intention. My desire, and I want to be clear about this, I've received nothing but mostly hatred for this over the years, except by the people who love me and support me, my clients and friends and family. Most of the world hates this. And I have still done it because I believe in it so firmly, is to change the fitness industry and the way people think about health and wellness. Now, the reason I'm
Mhm.
using this comparison is to illustrate that. The comparison is simple. You have a Chinese stone dragon in a garden. You have a gardener who washes it every day. His family has been washing this stone statue every day for the past 200 years. This family uses a garden hose and a scrub brush and the chemicals, I don't know, whatever, bleach or something, okay? And they scrub the statue stone once a week so it doesn't get moldy. You guys get the idea. Nice, clean statue, right? Okay, well, the castle to the left, they've had the same statue for the same 200 years in their family. The only difference is this family uses a garden hose attached to a pressure washer. Now, the pressure washer means they use considerably yet less water. They use considerably less time, effort, money. They do not damage the statue at all unintentionally. The statue is still as good as it ever was. This pressure washer is not going to hurt it. It's considerably more efficient by a magnitude of, let's say, 20 times. There's no damage, no possibility of damage, only efficiency, only the best efficiency, only no wasted time. My workouts, my clients' workouts are 15 minutes, 20 tops, 3 or 4 days a week. That's it. That's how
Mhm.
you build muscle efficiently, intelligently. There's no reason, unless you're skill-based training, to be spending hours in the gym like an athlete. Athletes do have to do that kind of skill-based stuff, but most people aren't. Most people don't need a gym membership. They don't need a personal trainer. They don't need any of this stuff. They literally just have to know these 10 basic things, and they're good, literally. And that's the whole message I'm trying to preach. And the fact that I have never met, I'm sorry, I've met two, but to be fair, the 2 I met were trained by Doug Bernoulli, who's at Biomechanics. It doesn't matter. Those are the only 2 I've ever met in 16 years of meeting hundreds of personal trainers who didn't outright laugh at me, ridicule me, or just call me a moron because I brought these concepts up, which means they don't know them.
But okay, so again, but based off of your original claim in the Facebook post, where you're saying if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise.
Correct.
Your claim basically applies to very few people if
98%.
your definition of understanding is so basic that as long as, like, for example, you give me somebody you're familiar with Paul Chek, correct?
For who? Sorry,
Paul Chek.
I'm not. No, sorry. Who is it?
Paul Chek. You're not familiar with Paul Chek?
I don't know who he is. So sorry.
Okay. Paul Chek, he wrote the book How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, and
Oh
he
yeah,
basically,
I
he coined the primal movement patterns: push, pull,
yeah.
bend, lunge, squat, twist, gait. There are 7 movement patterns. So within 1 minute, I could tell somebody pushing, when you push, just very, very broadly, you're training your chest, the front of your shoulders, your triceps. When you pull, you're training your back, the back of your shoulders, your biceps. Whenever you twist, you're training your core. Whenever you bend, you're training your posterior chain. So you're training your glutes, hamstrings, blah, blah, blah. Whenever you squat. So within 1 minute, you could teach somebody a very, very basic level of biomechanics. So when you say if you don't understand biomechanics, using your definition of just knowing like the bare minimum, It almost
10 basic things. So 10
yeah, but
basic things. Even what
that's
you
the thing
just
though.
said,
But that definition,
none of those 10 things are in anything you just said. So everything, the movement patterns you just gave, I'm not going to disagree. They're all movements which, I mean, even if you look at like paleoanthropical evidence, they're all movements we have absolutely been evolutionarily designed to do. All of those
yeah.
movements, absolutely. We need,
So let's say
I would even argue
let's say that's all that somebody. So let's say because let's say that's all that I know. I don't know anything else except for the fact that when I push, I train this, this, and this. When I pull, I train this, this, and this. When I twist, I train this. Would you say, based off of your definition of biomechanics and exercise, that I may not be the most skilled person at understand. I may not know every single technical aspect, but would you say that just based off of that knowledge alone, that I understand exercise or that I do not understand exercise?
You do not understand exercise.
Okay, so what else would I have to know
like
for
at
me
all?
to?
If that's all you know, you do not understand exercise at all.
And okay, so now the next question that I would ask is when you say that if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise, are you saying that biomechanics is sufficient enough to understand exercise? Are you saying that it is necessary, or are you saying that it is both necessary and sufficient enough?
That's a little tricky, and the only reason okay. So necessary, yes, yes. Sufficient. I'm tempted to lean towards yes if the involvement is exercise purely, and we don't want to bring things like nutrition and hormones, which I obviously think you should know, but just exercise. Just leave all that aside. Exercise.
Yeah, so like forget about rest and recovery, forget about nutrition.
No, I got you. Just scratch all that.
Just moving. We're just talking movement right now.
If you only understand biomechanics, I would say you are good to go as your average person. You are good to go as your average personal trainer, generally speaking, provided you have the knowledge we didn't mention. You're good to go as your average athlete. However, you're definitely missing two very key elements, which are never addressed, just as rarely addressed as biomechanics is addressed. Like, probably less rare, maybe, but very rarely addressed. And that is respiratory mechanics and skills, as well as previously mentioned and referenced, biotensegrity or understanding body structure, essentially, and how the body operates like a suspension structure, not like a compressive structure. It's tensile. I'll leave that alone. But those two things, in my opinion, if you want to be a personal trainer, you need to understand biomechanics. I mean, it's not debatable. You need to understand.
I would make the argument that if somebody just has the bare minimum understanding of which movement patterns affect a change in a specific muscle and a really, really good understanding of program design, they will get better results than somebody who lacks knowledge in program design but has a great understanding of biomechanics.
But within biomechanics and within the principles previously mentioned, that is included, the principles of hypertrophy. If you understand the principles of hypertrophy, you understand principles of intensity and frequency. And as long as we're leaving nutrition, sleep hygiene, hormones, everything else aside, then yeah, you're good. It's one of the principles.
I wouldn't really say that program design is part of the definition of biomechanics. I would, because when you're looking,
let me explain why it is, in my opinion. I mean, not only does almost every single piece of literature referencing biomechanics reference this as well within it. If it's a book about biomechanics, it does. It references this as well. And the reason for this is you can't separate the two. The reason muscles, as previously mentioned, the reason is they pull in a straight line is because they pull via muscle sliding theory. Now, this is, I don't want to get technical, but chemicals will pull your filaments together, essentially, and they are brought together. And that's why muscles will pull in a straight line. If it seems like it's pulling at an angle, it's actually multiple muscle groups working together. I don't want to get too much into that. But long story short, with muscle sliding theory comes three different components that you have to understand. Otherwise, you can't understand muscle sliding theory. One of the components is myofibrils and splitting myofibrils. One of the components is sarcoplasmic fluid, and one of the components is the fascia. Now, with those three components, those are the only three ways to generate hypertrophy. They're literally the only three options for hypertrophy growth. Now, all you have to do then is decide how you're going to go about doing it. Which kind of muscle fibers do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize endurance or strength-based? That's literally the only decision the person has to make.
So here's the thing, though. Like, so yes, you're using definitions of things like sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, myofibrillar hypertrophy, and fascia, but without understanding what myofibrillar hypertrophy is or what sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is, you can still get somebody better results by having a thorough understanding of program design and acute exercise variables. So if you understand how to manipulate sets, reps, intensity, time under tension, rest periods, and you know very basic biomechanics, you could achieve significantly greater results than somebody who is phenomenal with biomechanics but knows very little about program design. And just one example, one of the I remember
I just explained how they already have comprehensive knowledge of program and not design simply by understanding one principle. They understand how to program.
But understanding definitionally what sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is and what myofibrillar hypertrophy is doesn't
You have to
mean that
understand
you
what
understand. Sorry?
But you have to understand in order to understand what myofibril splitting is and understand what sarcoplasmic fluid enhancing is and the splitting of the fascia is, just in order to understand that, it's super simple. You have to understand what splits myofibrils, which is overload with a weight that they haven't experienced before. That's literally it. You have to understand, what sarcoplasmic fluid needs to be expanded, which is the fascia needs to be expanded. And that's basically just high rep training, to keep it simple. And then finally,
here's the problem, though, is you're conflating theoretical knowledge with practical application, because in theory, you could understand all of these concepts in theory, but not understand how to apply them in practice. For example, I know fuck all about cars. All I know really is how to put gas in my tank, how to charge a battery, how to change a tire. Aside from that, I know nothing. Even though I know absolutely nothing about the theory of how exactly engines work and how cars work, I could be a better driver than somebody who has all the theoretical knowledge of how cars work and how torque works, how drag operates, but who's never driven a car before. So just because somebody has a theoretical knowledge of biomechanics, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be able to translate that into a practical application.
But that's not, number one, I feel like we're getting sidetracked. Number one, that is not the claim. And number two, it's irrelevant anyways, in my opinion. So number one, the claim is, again, if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise, which I still think is factual. Because everything you're saying has so far it's just re-solidifying what I'm saying. I think, I mean, every time you're giving me an example of it, you know how to, Jesus, I don't know if you can hear that, sorry. Every time you give me an example of the bend, sit, twist, or whatever, I'm telling you that is not sufficient knowledge. That is not enough of biomechanics to understand. But now you're saying you're talking about programming now, and I'm explaining to you that if you understand at least what I'm telling you is sufficient knowledge for a basic human being, not even a personal trainer, just a basic human being, which, again, my clients know more than personal trainers do. It's not even questionable. They all know more than all personal trainers do. And they don't even need to. They don't even ask for it. They just do because they've learned via doing. But the point still stands. I mean, if you are a personal trainer and you don't understand biomechanics, you have no idea, generally speaking, what muscle group you're targeting. You don't know how much you're loading it. You don't know if you're loading it heavily enough or not. I can give you, I don't even know, hundreds of just examples of every exercise imaginable, every gym machine imaginable, which is made incorrectly, which doesn't target the muscle correctly because people don't care about it. They just built the machine. Exercises which are specifically geared to using the shortest levers possible and damaging your shoulders. Things which are common exercises, which are based on circus movements, which are not useful movements, and everyone does them for no reason. Overhead press, incline bench press, deadlift. There's literally no reason ever to do these movements besides ego, unless you're a power lifter, which is, again, an ego-driven sport anyways. There's no reason to ever do these movements, and they non-negotiably damage your body. And they're not at all efficient movements at targeting any of the muscles they're trying to target. Now, I'm just listing a few movements.
I would argue that every single one of the movements that you just listed, like for example, the deadlift and the overhead press specifically, those are
terrible
when
movements.
performed correctly, two excellent movements that you can incorporate into your routine. Because even though, for example, the deadlift, you're never lifting anything with a perfect bar, you're always knuckles to the ground, picking up a box, so you never have your hands clean on a bar. The pattern itself is something that you perform on a daily basis. Same thing with an overhead press. Anytime you have to pick something up, like for example, anytime you're putting anything overhead, anytime you're picking up a child, you're always doing that overhead pressing motion. So even though when you do an overhead press, you're not doing it in real life with your hands closed over a bar, there is still going to be a transfer over to your daily life. It may not be the exact implement that you were doing in day-to-day life, but whenever you do an overhead press, you are mimicking the motion of doing an overhead press in real life. So even though there isn't a 100% transfer from a barbell or a dumbbell to picking up a bag of flour and placing that over your head, you are still engaging the same movement pattern, and you are using the same muscles that you would.
Sure. Now let me just break that down real quick. So we're going to get into slightly separate territory here, but this is still within the principles I mentioned. So number one, in my opinion, if you're doing a movement which damages your body now and for the future, and this doesn't count for anti-fragility things. By the way, anti-fragility would be improving bone density, rebuilding tendons, muscles stronger, etc. Those are all anti-fragile. Some elements of your body are not anti-fragile, or worse, they're too anti-fragile and they will overcompensate badly. Now, some of these things would be the spine. Now, this is all knowledge people don't have to have, by the way, but I'm talking about you with this. Mm-hmm. Now, some of these things would be the spine and the shoulder joint and the pelvis very specifically, which are, let's just say, like weak spots. Let's put it that way. They're kind of weak points. Knees too. Ankles. You guys get the idea. High stress points. Now, when you're doing an overhead press, my opinion, well, I don't even say that. It's not even opinion. I mean, splitting hairs, put it that way, splitting hairs, you have no need whatsoever to practice a skill-based movement with heavy weight. The muscles you're attempting to target with the overhead press are the shoulder muscles. These muscles are the front deltoid, the lateral deltoid, and the rear deltoid. That's what you're attempting to target when you're using the overhead press. You're also going to get your clavicular fibers to a small degree, these guys.
So hold on, before you continue with that point, I would like to point out that you're kind of conflating two different things, because right now what you're doing is you are saying there's no reason to do an overhead press because it's targeting X amount of muscles.
Yep.
Whether or not the overhead press is going to be a good exercise is going to be dependent on the goal of the individual. So for example, let's say your goal is you want to build up a little bit of core stability. An overhead press is a great exercise for building core stability because your center of gravity increases. Whenever your center of gravity increases, it means you less stable. So when you're less stable, your core has to engage a little bit more. So if your goal is to build the biggest shoulders possible, then I would agree. Yeah, a standing military press is a horrible exercise. It's not going to accomplish the goal. However, if your goal is just to build a little bit of improve and strengthen the core, doing an overhead press with an amount of weight that is manageable for you and that you can perform properly is going to accomplish that goal. So it's not a matter of whether or not an exercise is horrible. It's will that exercise accomplish the intended goal? So if your goal is to build the biggest shoulders possible, yeah, a military press is a stupid exercise. It's not going to help you accomplish that goal. If your goal is, I want to strengthen my core, doing a military press with a load that is manageable and you can perform with proper technique is going to help you accomplish that goal, strengthening.
That is also a very inefficient way to do it with lots of risk. So I was literally getting to that, but you're the one conflating things. So I'm not trying to be rude. But there's a big difference between building muscles and skill acquisition. So again, none of this is things other people have to know, but just chatting with you about this. So skill acquisition is determined via the programming of your fascia. It has nothing to do with your muscles. Your muscles are not part of the equation. Your muscles move in straight lines. Your fascia is what determines how you acquire skills. Now, skill-based training is anything from learning how to walk, juggle, throw a knife, pick up a box and put it overhead, bend down to pick something up. Those are all patterns of movement which your body learns. Now, your neurological programming that occurs via the fascia doesn't even happen while you're doing the movement. It happens while you're sleeping. Furthermore, the movement itself does not require any weight to be performed. There's no reason to add weight to the movement to program the movement. You don't have to. Furthermore, the overhead press damages the shoulder regardless of the weight used or the form used or the individual's body morphology, unless you're using a particular, they have particular bars which do actually nerf this effect. But at that point in time, you're actually changing it to just a front delt overhead press. It's a different thing. I don't want to get off topic, but regardless, overhead press, the machines with barbells, with dumbbells, it's not even a natural movement, as is evidenced by the fact that it destroys your shoulders via the bursa, the tendons, the actual shoulder cradle itself, combined with the fact that most people don't train their scapular muscles, is the reason why everybody has those shoulder injuries, specifically because they do things like that. Now, I'm not talking about having to have an understanding of biomechanics to build the best shoulders or anything else like that. There is simply, if you want to have core stability, there's better ways to do it. If you want to build your shoulders, there's better ways to do it. It's just, it is what it is. And those better ways are within the principles I am mentioning. And again, I don't think it's complicated to understand any of these things. I mean, I sent half of them to you. I didn't really elaborate, but I mean, I can send you simple things where I just
But
lay it out.
even right now, so right now, the problem is you're taking general concepts and you're treating them as absolute. So for example, with the shoulder press example, you're saying there's no reason to lift anything up overhead. When you look at just basic shoulder anatomy, the shoulder, it does flexion, it does abduction, it does medial lateral rotation. So if we just look at the basic biomechanics of the shoulder joint, it is responsible for shoulder.
And I said that there are bars. I said that there are bars which make it a front deltoid overhead. This is a healthy movement. This is the only healthy overhead movement, and it's all it is a bad front deltoid exercise. That's all it is.
Yeah, but with regard to the, again, you are inserting your goals onto the individual, because at the end of the day, like when you talk about, so one of the things that you said is if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise. Another thing though is with regard to exercise, effective exercise is dependent on the goal of the individual. So if, for example, let's say somebody has scapular, go ahead. Let's say somebody has some scapular instability and you want to improve stability in the scapular girdle. Something like a multi-directional press where you press up overhead, turn the arms out, come back down, come in, open, up, you are going through all of the different ranges of motion at the shoulder joint. So you are pressing into shoulder flexion, you're pressing into shoulder horizontal abduction. On the way down, you're descending into adduction, you're descending into extension. So you are training all of the different movements that are responsible at the shoulder joint by doing a press with the elbows in front, a press with the elbows out to the side. If you never press with your elbows out to the side, what's going to happen is you are going to cause dysfunction at the scapular girdle, because you're going to always be pressing in just one specific direction rather than pressing in all of the different directions that the shoulder is intended for. Same thing with any exercise. If you only do one specific pattern, let's say for pressing, if you only ever do a bench press, you're going to be lacking strength in overhead pressing. You're going to be lacking strength in your downward pressing. And with regard to
you're solidifying my points. Like, I mean, I don't. Again,
no, but you're saying though. You're saying that there is no reason to ever do an overhead press.
No, because everything you just said, literally everything you just said is just re-solidifying that if you don't have basic biomechanical knowledge, you're gonna do dumb shit. And I stand by the fact that, by the way, I haven't done an overhead press in almost 20 years. I have no reason to. By the way, I guarantee you, I can go do a 225 overhead right now, no problem. Guaranteed. I haven't done it in 20 years, and I'm guarantee you, no problem. I guarantee you I can do a
okay, hold
500
on.
deadlift.
So right now though, you're basically you're doing an appeal to authority. You're saying that
No,
because
I'm not. I'm saying
yeah, you are.
anecdotally.
You said you've never done an overhead press. You could still, but hold on. You said you've never done an overhead press, but right now you could
20
press
years.
225. There are strongman competitors that overhead press all the time, and they could overhead press over 500 pounds. So the fact that you could press 225 pounds and you haven't pressed in 20 years,
it's an anecdotal. No, it's an anecdotal refusal of what you said. That's all it is.
Yeah, your anecdote though is an appeal to authority because you're saying I haven't done it in 20 years and I can still press.
That's not appeal to authority. I don't consider myself an authority on on this particular thing. I'm telling you that I personally, anecdotally, with all of my knowledge, have not done incline bench press, overhead press, deadlift. Now, that doesn't change the fact that my body is perfectly capable of doing every one of those. Now, here's the thing. I can go do whatever weight my muscles are currently doing at the moment. Now, if you give me 2 weeks to 3 weeks to acquire the skill-based technique necessary, my weight will jump up dramatically. But it doesn't change the fact that I would never do those movements because they hurt your body. I don't want to do that.
But they only would hurt your body if you do them using a load that your body is not capable of handling, as well as if you are incapable of doing it with proper form. Because if you have proper form and your muscles are strong enough to handle the load, then there is no damage that will be incurred by the body. The only time you're going to damage is if you cannot perform the exercise properly, or if you are using a load. The closer you get to your maximum, the closer you are going to increase the probability of injury. So, for example, if you were to do
explain to me how you are going to know if you're doing it correctly if you don't understand basic biomechanics. Please explain that to me. How are you going to know? By the way, I see personal trainers in the gym every day. I go to multiple gyms every day. These people have no idea what they are doing. Dozens every day. They have no clue. No clue. None.
Okay, so with regard to do you know if you are doing it correctly, again,
how could you
with regard to whether or not somebody is doing an exercise correctly, there are levels to knowledge of how exactly to perform a specific exercise. So with regard to a shoulder press, if you are performing an exercise, you are doing it, there is no pain whatsoever. You are able to perform it without strain. You are able to continually improve. Then while you may not be executing it with 100% efficiency, you are kind of conflating excellent technique with good enough technique. You do not need to have the most flawless, perfect technique to perform an exercise effectively. It just needs to be good enough. So, for example,
still not that's not my claim. That's still not my claim, though.
But you're saying that if you don't understand biomechanics, how can you know if you're doing an exercise correctly? Yes. With regard to doing an exercise correctly, even if you take 100 different people, have them perform one exercise, and you grade them from the worst technique possible to the most flawless technique possible, it's not you're either doing it incorrect or you're doing it perfectly. There's a whole spectrum in between there of how exactly the exercise can be performed. So with regard to
on that point, within that spectrum,
yeah.
Here's the thing. Let's say we have, for the sake of 100 people. Go to a gym. We pull out 100 people. We say to 100 people, I want you guys to do a lateral raise, and you guys are all going to do it with perfect technique. Okay. We look at all 100 people, and we're going to grade them on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, let's just say we arrange them, and every 10, just to keep it simple, every 10 go up one number. So these guys are god awful. These guys are it gets better and better every 10 people. Okay, so that's the argument.
Yeah.
So, a spectrum, nice and even, nice and clean. Okay. Here's the problem. None of those lateral raises being performed by those people, if it's a standing lateral raise, is correct. because that's not a correct movement. And none of those people to begin with didn't even know that. Number two, they don't know what that means. Number three, now form-wise, they could be perfectly executing a perfectly executed standing lateral raise. I could be making sure he was, to be perfectly clear about it. It doesn't change the fact that a standing lateral raise is a backwards resistance curve. It's not going to grow your lateral deltoids unless you spend 30 times longer than is necessary doing it years-wise.
But again, you are inserting your goal into the individual, because in order for an exercise to be effective or ineffective, it needs to accomplish the intended goal.
Yes.
So if your goal
in every scenario, if there is a goal, you have absolutely, at least via exercise, you have a million ways to get to that goal in exercise. You can CrossFit, you can Zumba, you can learn powerlifting, you can whatever it may be, whatever you want. And it doesn't change the fact that literally, in my opinion, literally, without biomechanics, as previously mentioned, you have no idea what muscle you're targeting, so you can't accomplish any specific goal because you don't know what you're targeting. You don't know how much you're
recognition, even without knowing anything whatsoever. If all I know is I pick boxes up off the ground, I want to make my life easier, I am going to put a little bit of sand in a box. I'm going to pick it up. When that feels easy, I'm going to put a little bit more sand in a box. If I am a baker who lifts bags of flour and puts them on a high shelf, I'm going to get a sandbag. I'm going to put that overhead. I'm going to slowly put more sand, put it overhead.
I get it. But does that mean that that person understands exercise? No, they do not. No, they should not be coaching other people. No, they do not. No, they should not.
We're talking about, so now you're talking about something else. Because again, what I mentioned at the very beginning was the amount of knowledge that you need is going to be dependent on the person that you have in front of you and their goals. So again, if somebody has zero understanding of biomechanics whatsoever, they shouldn't be treating physiotherapy patients. They shouldn't be coaching professional athletes.
Yep.
But
I agree, they should not be. I agree, they should not be.
So
I think 95%.
So again, like it is the amount of knowledge in biomechanics is going to be that one requires in order for exercise to be effective is dependent on the goal of the individual in front of them. So again, for me, I coach athletes and I run a physiotherapy clinic. So my level of biomechanics is going to be much more rigorous than what somebody is going to understand if they are just looking to help somebody that has no pain, no dysfunction. They're just looking to maybe get a little bit stronger, maybe build a little bit of muscle, lose a little bit of fat, but they don't have a specific goal like they want to be the world's strongest man. They don't want to be Mr. Olympia. They don't have any specific dysfunction in the body.
Believe me, I get these people too, believe me. And I don't teach them muscle groups or anything. I don't do any of that. There's no need. You don't have to do any of that to know more than a personal trainer. You really don't. And again,
using your definition of if you don't understand biomechanics, because right now you're using a very
generous definition, very generous, I think, very bare minimum.
Yeah, but again, you're kind of. It gets back to the very first question that I originally asked you, which was, what level of biomechanical knowledge counts as sufficient for understanding exercise?
And I've already told you, I think of the understanding 10 very simple basic principles, which I've taught children of 10 years old. And I would also restate that I have yet to meet a personal trainer besides 2 who were trained in biomechanics who knew any of these things. Now, again, I would like to appeal not only to my argument, but to the contrary, the reason for the argument. The reason for the argument is because people are spending an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours in the gym. People think they have to take drugs. People hire personal trainers who get them no results. Most of my clients have had 7 or 8 trainers with no results. And I understand why. It's because nothing is actually known by the person attempting to help them. Now, lots of times we've discussed this previously, but bad coaching. You could literally just be a bad coach, you know, like you could have all the right knowledge, but suck with people. That was me for a little while. I mean, I still kind of suck with people. Ergo, why I'm taking on the entire fitness industry, because
Actually,
otherwise I don't think it would be a fair
real
fight.
real quick, now that you brought that up. So, perfect example. This was back in 2010. I remember I had this one coaching client, and back then I was very, very stubborn. So it was, I assessed you, I looked at what you needed, I came up with the perfect plan, and I would not want you to deviate from that plan. And there were people that I had back then that just got terrible results. And the reason they got terrible results was because I was picking exercises that they were not going to adhere to because it was terrible.
Yep.
Because I was so obsessed with the aspect of biomechanics and I didn't look into the psychology aspect of coaching, even though I understood this is the best exercise in this specific instance for this individual, I could have just as easily picked another exercise that maybe wasn't 100% the best exercise for that individual, but it still accomplished the goal, and it still would have accomplished the goal that the person was intending. So, for example, this one.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I've had that many times, and I totally understand what you mean.
So that goes back to the heart of the question: is what is the bare minimum level of knowledge in biomechanics that you consider sufficient? Because you keep saying you need to understand these 10 things, but within those 10 things, again, there is a level of sufficient knowledge that you would require for each of those 10 things.
Let me see if I can.
Right now, so let me just. I'll say where exactly I agree and where exactly I think we're getting a little bit stuck.
This is where I wish Jerry was here.
Let me concede certain things. Biomechanics is absolutely going to matter if your goal is to improve coaching precision. So if you want to get the best result possible in the shortest amount of time, the more knowledge you have in biomechanics is definitely going to be a net benefit. With regard to things that you mentioned earlier, like reciprocal inhibition, when you were talking about bilateral limb deficits, all of that stuff, those are going to absolutely be important if you're working with athletes, if you are working with rehabilitation patients. With regard to the muscles pulling in a straight line, understanding that is going to be beneficial with regard to the lines of pull if you are looking to maximize the efficiency in a specific target muscle that you are training. With regard to, you mentioned earlier, the bilateral deficit. If you are working with somebody whose goal it is to generate the maximum amount of force possible, these are all going to be beneficial. I think where we are getting stuck is what is beneficial versus what is necessary for someone to understand exercise. Because having just a bare minimum knowledge is very different from having very technical knowledge to help a very specific subset of the population. So even with regard to the movement patterns, even if you don't understand lines of pull, you don't understand bilateral limb deficits, you don't understand any of that, if you just know, when I push, I train this, this, and this. When I pull, I train this, this, and this.
I need half a sec. 1 sec. I just need half a sec. My cat. Sorry. 1 sec.
Okay. Sorry. Actually, while you're doing that, I'm going to go turn on my sauna because after this is done, I'm going to hop in the sauna.
Perfect. Sorry. Just 1 sec. Sorry, honey. Sorry, baby. I was talking.
Okay, there we go. In about half an hour, should reach the temperature that I need.
She was yelling at
so yeah. So with regard to, because it comes down to the wording and the person in front of you, because even if you don't understand the technical aspects of all of these different things that you mentioned, you could still, and I'm not disagree. I agree. I think the more education that somebody has, the better it's going to be. And ideally, yes, there are a lot of shit trainers that know fuck all, and it would benefit if more people were more educated and they actually understood how to. They understood more about all of these different topics. But I think where we're getting stuck right now is the vague wording of if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise, because it's not a matter of an on or off switch where you either understand or you don't understand. What I'm trying to pin down is when you say if you don't understand biomechanics, what is the absolute bare minimum requirements that would suit your definition of understand? Because again, if I just understand that when I do this, I'm training my chest, triceps, and delts. When I do this, I'm training my biceps, my back, and rear delts. That's all I know. I don't know anything else. I don't know. I can't name the bicep. I can't name the tricep. I can't name the pecs. All I know is that when I do this, this gets trained. When I do this gets trained. Is that sufficient enough? If that's not sufficient enough, what would be the bare minimum requirements where I would have enough understanding of biomechanics that would suit your definition of understanding and understanding exercise?
The frustrating thing is I understand this is the point of contention.
Your mic is kind of, it's a lot lower than it was a few seconds ago.
How's now? Better?
It's still pretty muted compared to, because before I was hearing you crystal clear. Now it sounds like it's very, I can still hear you, but it's a lot more quiet than it was before.
How about now?
I could still hear you, but it's just a lot more quiet than it was earlier.
How about now?
Not a problem. It's not a problem though. I can still hear what you're saying.
Let me turn this off. Might help. Is that any better?
No, it's the exact. It doesn't matter. I could still hear you.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's the internet. I'm sorry. I don't really know what it would be. Let me just see if there's a volume option. Yep. Apologies. Did it cut out when we stopped?
Yeah, because as soon as we got back, all of a sudden the volume on your mic went down a little bit. I could still hear you. It's just a little bit lower than it was earlier.
I didn't touch anything. I'll just talk louder. So I'll just talk a little louder.
Okay.
So the thing is, I understand the point of contention. And I'm not using this as an out. I'm just trying to find an explaining point here. I've mentioned it to you before. A lot of my viewers know this. Contrary to popular appearances, I know how I look and speak and stuff. I'm actually really autistic, and things like this are actually really hard for me, just so you guys understand that. But that being said, that's not the problem. I think the problem is the actual semantics, because I just think about things differently. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I just think about things differently. So I'm going to change my wording a bit. Maybe that'll help. So
here, let me go back. So at the very beginning, I kind of gave you a little bit of background about myself, how I started training in 2000. Then in 2001, as one of my electives in grade 10, I took weight training. In grade 11 in 2010, I took exercise science. By 2009, I started learning directly under Charles Poliquin, who's one of the top strength coaches in the world. I don't know if you're familiar with Charles Poliquin. Okay, so between 2009 and 2018, up until his passing, I studied directly under him. So at each of those points, my knowledge of biomechanics was not the same between 2000 and 2009. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking for what exactly is a sufficient amount of knowledge in biomechanics for you to say that at this point right over here, this is where you understood exercise. Before that point, you did not understand exercise.
I understand. I firmly understand. I do. So I'm going to have to try to, it's going to sound like I'm not answering you, but it's going to come to a conclusion. So I think the issue is you are thinking in terms of schooling. I'm not at all. I'm not a fan. Frankly, I'm not a fan of schools, and I'm not a fan of certificates. I don't like them. They're just arguments from authority, and I've never really met somebody who had one who actually earned the damn thing and knew anything. That's why I don't like them. It's, again, a bit irrelevant to me. So I'm not talking about schools. I am talking about, when I say 10 things, 10 principles, I'm not referencing a school system. I'm just referencing learning some basic things that your body does. So the only way I could try to think about it is there's obviously a big distinction between how I will treat a client who is just, I need to lose 40 pounds and improve my mobility. You know what I mean? Now, I'm always going to encourage them to do better than that, of course, but I approach them completely different than somebody who says, I need to get my speed down a minute, or I have to increase my vertical jump, or I have to, whatever it may
be. Here, let me make this even easier.
Well, I got
so I'll for example, let's say the bench press. If I know that when I do a bench press, I'm training my chest, front of my shoulders, and the triceps, would you say that I understand exercise at that point, or no?
No.
Okay, what about that makes you say that I don't understand exercise just based off of that one example? What was the limiting factor between me not understanding exercise and me understanding exercise in that one example?
So in that one example, for just again, in that one particular example, regardless of what the motivation is, and I don't want you to think that I'm speaking to a bodybuilder goals or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The human body has evolved the way it has over time, and that includes our musculature.
Yeah.
Now, our musculature has movement patterns it's supposed to do. Now, that being said, the issue with, I know if I do this, it trains my chest and etc. And why I say you do not understand exercise at that point is because you would not be doing that particular exercise unless you were, again, this is where you have to get into goals. So
power lifter, yeah, unless you're a power lifter.
Just for the sake of understanding, I would have to know what that person does not understand exercise, because in no world would just understanding that get you to any goal.
Okay, so let's go one step further now. Let's say that I understand that lying down on your back, pressing a bar away from your chest, I know the muscles that it trains. And going one step further, I understand that it is not a movement pattern that is applicable to daily life, and that instead of performing a pressing movement where you're laying down on your back, pressing a bar away from your body, I now understand that a more applicable exercise would be standing up and doing a horizontal press, because that is more applicable to daily life than laying down on your back and pressing a bar. At that point, would you say that I understand exercise or don't understand exercise just based off of that one extra layer?
I mean, you didn't really add much with the one layer, so no.
Okay, so we went from just understanding that motion trains the chest, the shoulders, and the triceps to understanding that in real life, you're never really laying down on your back, pressing something away from you. So a more applicable exercise for the general population is doing something like a standing horizontal press, because then you're using more muscle. So like, let's say now I understand that when I do a standing press, any type of standing horizontal press, let's say with a cable machine or even just taking a ball and throwing it, now I understand that I am engaging my core a little bit more. I understand that in terms of how exactly the movement pattern transfers into my daily life, it is something that I would be much more likely to do in real life. So right now, I still, by your definition, don't understand exercise based off of that.
Correct.
What is one thing on top of that that I would need to know for you to say that I'm one step closer to understanding exercise?
To what?
So like one layer on top of that.
What has already been said, we're just going to add something to that?
Yeah, so give me one thing that I could add on top of that where I still wouldn't understand exercise by your definition, but I would be one step closer to understanding exercise.
Okay. The next easiest step for you in that situation would be lever magnification.
Okay. So let's say I understand that here's the other thing too, with regard to all of these things that you're bringing up, is when you bring up things like levers and lines of pull, you are taking general concepts, but you're treating them as absolutes. But really, in real life, it's not that simple, because you have to take a look at the body as a whole. So, for example, with regard to,
you're asking me to keep it simple, though. I'm keeping it as simple as I can.
Yeah.
You keep asking me what the claim is for understanding biomechanics, but I would be satisfied with the claim. You don't have to even know. You don't have to know.
Okay, so if I understand, like, let's say I'm going to use the example now of a pec fly. So I understand that a bench press and a pec fly, generally, let's just stick to just the chest and the shoulders, training the same muscles. I understand that as I get over here, because the lever is farther away from the joint, it becomes more difficult. And over here, because the joints are stacked, it becomes easier. I'm now one step closer to understanding exercise.
I just say,
but I still, by your definition, just based off of knowing that trains the chest and the shoulder, that is going to be harder over here than it is over here.
Yep.
I'm one step closer, but I still, by your definition, do not understand exercise.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to be facetious either. Just understanding lever magnification, which I just want to keep it simple for everybody, just who didn't follow him. Shorter lever is like shorter lever. Longer lever is just longer lever. Now, depending on how long it is, it just means it changes how much torque is at the end of it. That's all it means. In the context of exercise, what he was referring to with the pec fly was, if you're doing a bench press, you're still moving the upper arm through the same range of motion as you do with a pec fly, pretty much. The difference is you have a twice as long as a lever. Instead of 12 inches, you have a 24-inch lever. So you use half the weight. Everybody knows that the pec deck is harder than when you do a bench press. You do more weight with the bench press. That's because of the lever magnification. Now, just knowing about lever magnification, I would say, is a massive step, huge step, big step. Now, how far away are you? 9 steps.
Okay, so what would be the next? So just using the pushing pattern as a continued example. So now I understand that when I push, I'm training the chest, front of the shoulders. I understand that if I'm doing something like a fly as opposed to a compound movement, the further away my wrist gets from my shoulder, it's going to be harder because of the moment arm. What would be the next? Next step that would get me closer to understanding exercise, but I still, by your definition, would not understand exercise. It just gets me one step closer.
Opposite muscle groups.
Okay.
I think that's fair, right?
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean by that, because okay,
so I understand. In this current example, you're referencing the pectorals, and as I mentioned before, we have opposing muscle groups, and they do opposing things. Now, the opposing muscle group in this particular case is going to be the middle and lower trapezius, those muscles connected to your shoulder blades, everybody. Yeah. So the reason I'm bringing up opposing muscle groups, and why, I mean, at least in the way you're laying this out, the next step would be opposing muscle groups, is if the person is training their chest, they understand lever magnification, and let's just say they're doing.
So let me try to steel man your argument. For me to know exercise, I need to know that when I do this, I also need to do this to balance out.
Yes.
So that would be one step. Am I getting your argument right? Like, I need to know that and that oppose each other.
You're good. 100% easy. Yep. Easy.
Okay.
Now that being said, I want to make one thing clear though. But just because I apologize, autistic and picky, the movement you just referenced would be your rear deltoids, not your middle and lower trapezius. So just to be clear. So the middle and lower trapezius are attracted to your shoulder blades, and you have to move your shoulder blades closer together. Again, this is what we're going to get to in those steps in a minute, but that's the resistance curve within the right resistance curve.
Okay, now, to make this even simpler with regard to the opposing muscle groups, if I'm pressing with the elbows tucked in, I'm pulling with the elbows tucked in. If I'm pressing with the elbows tucked out, I'm pulling with the elbows tucked out. If I'm bringing the wrist up to the sky, I'm then bringing the wrist down. Every one of those movements, if I go out and I go in.
Simplified. Yeah.
So if I understand that, I am one step closer to understanding exercise, but still, just knowing the muscles that I train, just knowing the levers, and just knowing the opposing muscles, at that point, I still, by your definition, do not understand exercise. So what would be one more layer on top of that that would, by your definition, get me one step closer to understanding exercise?
Muscles pull in a straight line.
See, again, here's
you have to remember though. You have to remember though. I'm keeping things simplistic because you asked to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
This keeping it as simple. There's more to it. This is something I think you need to understand. Basic understanding. Muscles pull, and they get pulled in a straight line. Now, this is not for everything true. It gets a lot more. Believe me, it gets very complicated at the upper layers. But for simplicity's sake, skeletal muscles pull in a straight line.
Okay, so okay, for example, let's just stick with the chest right now.
Okay. Yeah.
So with the pectoral fibers, like you have the sternal attachment, you have the clavicular attachment. So knowing that if my elbow is over here, because again, like with regard to the pecs, it's not just one muscle fiber pulling in one direction, it's fan shape. So you have the inferior fibers that are going to pull in an upward diagonal. You have the horizontal fibers that are going to pull horizontally. You have the clavicular fibers that are going to pull more in an upward direction. So knowing that when my arm is out to the side and I pull this way, I'm targeting these fibers. If my elbow's tucked in, because the pec attaches from here to here, I'm going to be targeting more of these fibers because of the line of pull. That brings me one step closer to understanding exercise now. Okay.
Correct. Now, an important caveat to that, just to use this example, is many people, for example, don't do decline bench press. And I'm generalizing. We're just talking about on a bell curve here. Most people just kind of avoid decline bench press. Now, that's the best movement for your chest because it targets 95% of your pectoral fibers. The flat bench press targets most of them, depending the angle you're doing it, the angle of your spine, torso, etc. It's also a good movement. However, just again, goes back to what I consider basic knowledge. If you understand just the couple principles we just laid out, you would know that incline bench press does not train your chest, for example. And everyone thinks it does, but that's a front deltoid movement. Unless you arch your back or you lower the position too much, in which point in time you're changing your torso in relation to your pectorals,
okay, so
you're not making a chest exercise.
So here's the other part right now. When you said, so with regard to the level of inclination, it's not like the level of recruitment from the pectoral fibers goes from 100 to 0 the second you go on an incline.
Yeah.
The more incline you get, the less you're going to start to recruit the pecs, and the more you're going to start to get to the shoulder. So when you say the incline bench press does not train your chest, it trains your shoulder, at what level of inclination and at what percentage of recruitment are you specifically referring to?
Gotcha. So anything above 20-degree incline primarily only targets your clavicular fibers. It doesn't even target the rest of your chest at all. Now, the reason I have to add this caveat is because this is a slightly complex topic. So adding this caveat is it also depends on the individual's body morphology. So everything that we're referencing right now in regards to the pectorals, it depends entirely on the relation of the attachment on the upper arm to the attachment on the sternum. And different people have different shaped ribs and bones and stuff. So that affects things. And also what changes is a big one. You guys, just to give you a ridiculous example, how about those power lifters who arch their back like they're the McDonald's sign, those guys? They do that to limit range of motion, etc. Use their chest muscles. You guys, it's a little bit ridiculous to do that, but people will do that also with the incline thing because they want to feel it more in their chest. They will literally change the position by rotating their chest upwards while they're doing it. Now, this is changing the torso in relation to the arm, and most coaches I see teaching their athletes to do incline chest will literally tell them to do that, which is again defeating the purpose of the incline. So I don't know why they do it. But again, so that matters. But anything over a 20% incline, as long as your spine, let's just say, is neutral. I mean, again, I don't want to get too specific, but like as long as your spine is like neutral on the 20-degree angle, we'll say, you're only targeting your clavicular fibers and front deltoids.
Okay, so now,
I mean, the ship below the claviculars, like right here, is going to get a little bit, but like it's not much.
Because the pecs are kind of a fan shaped, it's going to also depend on elbow position. So like if you're doing
Again,
an
that's going to
incline
matter.
press, the elbows are right out, like you're doing a guillotine press, something like that.
However,
Are you making the claim, like when you say you're only targeting the clavicular fibers, are you making the claim that the sternal attachment has zero contribution, or are you saying it has less than 50%? What
less than 50? Less is minimal. I mean, muscles have something called, this is another one of the steps, by the way, but muscles have something called an all or nothing contraction principle. So while you are doing this incline benching press movement, and I want to add something about the elbows, by the way, everything you said about the elbows is exactly right. But just going back to what we were referencing with elbows, you don't even have to know all of that again to have a basic understanding of biomechanics. You have to understand that the chest attaches right here, and it goes in a straight line, and it goes to here. Now, the thing is, when you're going into any form of pressing movement, your elbows by necessity will be, somewhere up here or around here, whatever. They're going to be somewhere elevated. Now, on anatomy charts, when we're like this, yeah, it's fan shaped and some of them go up. But as soon as you change your arm placement to anything with the elbow like this, now those fans are all going down. All of them, except for the clavicular fibers. Those don't change because they're not attached the same way as the rest are. But the rest of it is now suddenly facing down at a decline angle. I mean, this is more technical than I want to get into because you don't have to understand this, but like it's, again, you don't need to understand that, but it does actually completely change the angle when you raise your arm. It changes the angle of the fibers.
Okay, so you're not making the claim that the sternal attachment has zero contribution whatsoever. You're just saying it has less than 50%, if I'm steel manning your position.
Yeah, minimal. I mean, it's doing some shit. Like, it's working, but is it working fully? No. Is it working the best it could be? No. Is it doing stuff? It's doing some stuff.
Okay. So now I understand this trains the chest. I understand that this, because of the lever, is going to be harder than when the weight is right over here in terms of the chest. I understand that if my arm is here, the muscles that cross that section, because they pull in a straight line, I'm going to be targeting the horizontal fibers. What is the next level? So, but at this point, I still, by your definition, do not understand exercise.
Oh, you're definitely well above most people. You're head and shoulders above most people. But again, understand exercise? No.
Okay, so what would be the next level up that would get me one step closer now to understanding exercise by your definition?
Resistance curve.
Okay, so let's say with regard. Okay, so that I understand that if I am doing, pick an exercise. You want to just stick with the bench press, or you want to pick something else?
Stick with the lateral raise because I referenced that earlier. It's an easy one to understand, the lateral raise.
Okay, so I understand that it's going to be more difficult over here than it is when my arm is down by my side.
Mm-hmm. But that understanding is not sufficient because that's impartial. So that's not enough.
But
so
it does bring me one step closer to understanding exercise.
No, but that's not the resistance curve. That's the problem. So you have to understand the correct resistance curve. So the correct resistance curve applies to skeletal muscles. Now this is, again, goes back to sliding theory. So a correct resistance curve for a muscle is it begins with the most amount of force when the muscle is lengthened, and it concludes with minimal force with the muscle contracted. At the midway point.
Here's the other problem though, is you're taking these general concepts and applying them as absolutes, whereas within the body, like all of the concepts that you're bringing up are definitionally true as concepts, but with regard to understanding exercise, something like the resistance curve, you mentioned that, okay, so when the muscle is lengthened, you could generate more force. When it is contracted, you could generate less force. For
Now, by
somebody who,
necessity, one second though, by necessity though, that also means that the loading needs to be heaviest in the beginning and lightest at the end. Now, it's not a concept, it's a chemical principle. It's a physical principle. It's not a concept. It's how we're designed, evolutionary. It's literally how we're built. It's not a concept. This is how you function.
but
Now,
see, now we're getting though into theory versus practice, because here's the thing, you could understand that in theory, but in practice, if we were to take, for example, something like the bench press, you are going to, just because you can, the muscle, when it is in a lengthened position, it is going to be, you're going to be stronger in a lengthened position than in a shorter position, or you're going to be able to generate more force. If you take something like the bench press, for example, when you are, unless you're doing muscle testing on a muscle and you are isolating that muscle and you are removing it from the whole of the organism, when you take a look at an actual exercise and you don't isolate that one variable, understanding that one concept on its own without understanding things like for example, the moment arms,
which is why we've already addressed those.
Yeah.
But again, this is what
that concept in and of itself of when the muscle is lengthened, it's going to be able to generate more force.
By necessity, but not only that, but by necessity needs to for optimum development. Not only that, needs to. Now again, it's not debatable. And using the chest exercise, for example, let's just say we take a human being, we clone them, we give one of these human beings the knowledge about lever magnification and the resistance curve. That's it. That's just those two things, just those two. That's it. Resistance curve, lever magnification. Well, actually, and they both get a correct program. Sorry, that has to be the case too. They both have a correct program too. But one has the knowledge that the other doesn't. So they're both exclusively only worried about a bench press competition that they have against each other in 6 months. It's bro time. They're going head to head. Who's the better clone, right? Yeah. Now, one of them has the knowledge about the resistance curve. One doesn't. One knows about levers. One doesn't. Now, the one who knows about the levers and the resistance curve literally is going to far out surpass whichever example, the one who doesn't know.
But here's the thing, though. It kind of gets back to my point earlier of when I asked you to define what is the bare minimum, because right now you're giving me a scenario of two clones and one clone has one piece of information more.
I'm just keeping it simple. They just have two pieces of information more. They don't even have all of it. They just have two pieces.
But here's the thing. Whenever you give an example of you have two things that are absolutely identical, whenever one of those things has one piece more information, then obviously they are going to have a better understanding and going to be able to achieve better results.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to what exactly is the cutoff for understanding, because if you have two clones and they have all the exact same knowledge and one clone has one piece of knowledge more that the other one doesn't, then yes, they are. That's like saying you have two athletes.
One second. But does he understand exercise? No. He just has one more piece of information. I didn't say he understood. I just he had one small advantage over his clone. That's it. I didn't say he understood exercise. I said one tiny advantage, one piece of information, which is two pieces of information, which is going to grant him ridiculously dramatic results compared to the other, just because he had two small pieces of information.
But again, it comes. So now we're getting down to the semantic part of where exactly the cutoff is for what exactly do you consider sufficient. So because what you're describing right now, I could understanding exercise and understanding biomechanics. You are basically saying that, yes, within your understanding of biomechanics and understanding exercise, there is a spectrum of knowledge that one can have that will increase the amount of knowledge that they have. What I want to know is what exactly is the bare minimum cutoff. So, and again, like I could understand without being able to actually articulate any of the things that you just mentioned right now, I could understand that this trains this. I could understand that when my arm is here, it's going to be harder than when my arm is over here. I could understand
does
that
that
when
mean you
I go
understand
like this,
exercise? But that
this
doesn't
is
mean you
going.
understand exercise.
Sorry?
But how does that mean you understand exercise? You don't have any idea. I've referenced it several times, but you understand this does this, this trains. I get that.
Yeah.
But unless you actually know what muscle is being targeted, how much it's being loaded, if you're also training the opposite muscle, which makes a giant difference to everything, huge difference. If you don't also know, like, again, you simply, you're guessing and you do not understand exercise. You are guessing. I don't think
But
people should
then,
guess when it comes to
okay,
exercise.
if you're making the argument that if I don't understand all of those things that I'm guessing, then I could just as easily make the argument that unless you are somebody who is the foremost expert on biomechanics, that you are guessing as
Why?
well, because you don't know as much as this expert
No.
over here.
But you keep asking me how much information do I think requires for understanding of exercise regarding biomechanics. I keep telling you 10 things. I mean, 16 if you want to get technical, but 10 things. 10 things that you can teach to a child. 10 things which can be taught any number of ways. 10 things that anyone can learn. 10 things that you don't have to go to school to learn. 10 things which are intuitive by nature because it's how we're already designed evolutionary wise. 10 things which make your life 100 times easier. I don't understand. And again, when I say the claim is if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise, I'm still failing to see how that is factually inaccurate.
Okay, but here's the other thing too. So right now you're saying that these are things that somebody could intuitively know without going to school or anything like that. But at the same time, you're saying that somebody needs to understand biomechanics.
No. I said they intuitively understand because it's how the body was designed. So, for example, when I say that, what I'm referencing is, have you ever seen somebody pick up a dumbbell and do a bicep curl like this? I mean, maybe you fucking have, actually. People are dumb. But
I've seen some pretty dumb shit, yeah.
You would typically not see somebody be doing bicep curls with a dumbbell like this because it doesn't feel like you're doing biceps. It falls halfway down. You know it's not bicep. So they intuitively, what do people do? Intuitively, they do a bicep curl because they feel it like that. They do.
But now using your definition of just intuitively knowing these things, you could intuitively know all of this without understanding biomechanics.
Don't change words. I didn't say that. I said their body intuitively understands the principles because it's how their body was designed. I didn't say that they understand. I said that their body naturally will kind of understand. That means, for example, that when I tell you, what's a good example? Like, okay, so for example, a lot of personal trainers, they have their clients do like rows, T-bar rows, cable rows, stuff like that, and they're telling them you're targeting your back, targeting your back. Now they don't tell them what they're targeting or etc. It doesn't matter. But one of the things that if some of them know is that you'd be targeting your middle and lower trapezius. The issue is that you're not. You're targeting your rear delts primarily, your erector spinae, all of these other muscle groups, except the one that the personal trainer is trying to target. But the personal trainer thinks it's targeting it. Most people think it's targeting it. Hell, you can even feel those muscles when you're doing it. Why can you feel them? It's because they're being pulled and stretched. Does that mean that they're under tension? Does it mean that they're doing enough effort to actually accomplish anything? No. It just means that they're under some form of stress. It means they're being moved. You could feel it. Does that mean it's being trained? No. I can keep going through it. Like you can feel things just
fine. But again, so now like you're picking, like again, with regard to, you just mentioned that if somebody's doing a T-bar row or if somebody's doing just some type of row that they're going to actually be training this muscle instead of that. Again, now we're getting into like the position of the arms, because if I do a row with the elbows that are out to the side, now I'm going to be getting a lot more of things like the posterior deltoids. I'm going to be getting a lot more of the rhomboids, a lot more of the middle traps. Whereas if I do a row with the elbows tucked in, I'm going to be getting a lot more lats as opposed to other muscles.
Yep.
So,
no, again, no disagreement, but it doesn't change the fact that none of those movements are going to appropriately target your middle or your lower traps. None of those are appropriate for them because that person doesn't know about resistance curves. None of those will actually grow those target muscles because none of those are opposite position loaded. If a muscle is not opposite position loaded, no matter how much you want it to be,
But
no matter how much
this is also gets back to the point of goal specific, because what if somebody's goal isn't to grow a specific muscle? What if they just want to get stronger at that motion over there?
Yeah. What about it?
You don't have to understand biomechanics to know that if I want to get stronger at doing this motion, I need to do this motion.
I didn't say you had to. I said to understand exercise. I never said to do that movement. I said to understand.
Yeah, but if I understand that I want to get stronger at this motion, so I'm going to do exercises that mimic that motion, just using pattern recognition. Without understanding biomechanics, I could just use pattern recognition to recognize a pattern that I want to either improve or that somebody else does on a regular basis.
Yep.
Without understanding the biomechanical principles behind that
100%,
movement.
100%, no disagreement. And does that mean you understand exercise? No, you don't know anything about exercise.
But again, so then it's coming down to where exactly is the bare minimum cutoff, because all of these things that you're mentioning with regard
to 10 principles,
but within each of those 10 principles, it's not like you're treating all of them like they're an on or off switch where you either know it or you do not know it. Within each of those 10 principles, there's also going to be a spectrum of knowledge. So within biomechanics, there's a spectrum of knowledge that you can have from knowing nothing at all to knowing everything at all. And then with each of those 16 principles, as well, there's going to be some type
offshoots. Yeah, agreed. So here's again, check it out. I gotta, again, maybe it's just me, but I firmly believe that these principles are so easy to understand. And by the way, I don't have faith in people. I think most people are dumb. But I think most people, even the dumb ones, have no difficulty with these principles because specifically, because none of these require any of what I think you're assuming is more knowledge than is required. So let me explain what I mean. So let me just, for example, one of the things that I have all of my clients do, and again, this goes in exactly with what we're talking about, one of the principles. I might not tell them, hey, we're learning this principle today, or we're working on this. I don't do that. People don't give a shit. I mean, people don't give a shit. It's going to just, they don't care. I say, hey, pop quiz. What muscle is this? Pop quiz. What muscle is this? Bicep, tricep. What's bicep do? Does this. What's tricep do? Does that. Great. Like literally that kind of shit. Like that's learning a principle. We'll literally randomly go through. What's this do? What's that do? What's the name? What's this? And that's it. That's how you would learn it. It's not even hard. It's like they're all so easy to explain. It's my problem with why don't people know them?
But based off of see, the thing though is with regard to your claim of again, it comes down to your, like in some aspects you treat it like it's an on or off switch where you either know biomechanics or you don't, you know exercise or you don't. And then in other aspects, you treat it like somebody needs a certain level of expertise where if they're not an expert in one of these specific areas, they don't understand. So again, going back to, for example, myself, when I started training in 2000 and I knew very little, even though I knew nothing pretty much compared to what I know now, what about what I knew back then was not enough to know that I knew exercise? So like I knew that if I were to do a dumbbell press, I was going to be training the chest. I knew that when I did a fly, it's going to be harder over here than over here. I couldn't explain biomechanically what all of these different principles were. I just knew that, yeah, when I hold the weight over here and I'm lying down on my back, it's harder than when the weight is over here. When I
had a long time with that myself. Long time. I know exactly. I know. Long time with that myself. Long time. I understand. I get it. Now you're asking me, what did you not know?
No, I'm not asking you what I didn't know. I'm asking you to explain to me at that point in my life why I would not have known what exercise was back in 2000. Because I knew, like, I know that I knew that if I pressed, I was going to be training the chest, the shoulders. I knew that if I was doing the fly, that the weight was going to be more difficult to hold over here than when the weight was stacked up. I knew that. So
let's say, I mean, just to keep it simple, let's just say the well-read gym goer, maybe.
Yeah.
Use it. You want to use like a well-read gym goer example, perhaps. So it's not personal. What did you not know? Why did you not understand exercise at that point? Is that
yeah. Why? So back in 2000, why did I? Because I knew that. Like, I knew that if the weight was over here and I'm lying down on my back, it's going to be harder than when the weight's over here. I knew that when I did this motion, I was training this muscle over here.
Okay, so I understand, but I feel like
I may not have been able to articulate exactly. I may not have known what a moment arm was. I may not have known about lines of pull. I may not have known about reciprocal inhibition or any of these concepts. So why, like, if again, you're almost treating it like an on or off. Like, at some point, there would have been a point where I went from not knowing exercise to knowing exercise, and I want to know exactly when that point was where I went from not knowing exercise to knowing exercise.
Just do me a favor, just humor me. Give me like 10 seconds to just think and put, because I'm almost there, and I would like see if I can, because it's the same point, and let's see if I can word it differently. I got a thing I'm working on. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
So. Okay, so let's try this. When you have enough knowledge about your body, let me rephrase that. When you have enough knowledge about movement patterns that you don't do counterproductive things. I think that's as simply as I can list it.
Okay, so like now that that's pretty much the heart of the definition, that kind of gets back to my point earlier about the amount of knowledge that you need in biomechanics is going to be relative to the person and the goal that they have. So sure. I could not understand any of the 16 things that you mentioned, but just understanding movement patterns themselves, I could understand that this person does these specific movements by using similar implements and just gradually increasing the weight. I am going to make their life easier in those specific movements. So without understanding any biomechanics, just by understanding pattern recognition, I don't need to know any of those 16 things. I could just recognize the pattern and have the person mimic the pattern in their day-to-day life to make 100%. Their life easier. So if again, so here's a recent example. My mother, right? I go to visit my parents on the weekends, and whenever I go to visit, they have a couple of cats. My mom has this bag of cat litter or this box of cat litter. She always asks me to bring it down for her. And I told her, I said, if you want to make this task easier, keep one of the empty boxes, put a little bit of sand in it, and just pick it up. When that feels easy, put a little bit more sand, pick it up. So just knowing that, like, even if I didn't understand what muscles were being targeted, just knowing that this is a movement she does in her regular life, if she just gradually increases the weight, it's going to make that pattern easier for her. I don't need to understand any of the things that you just listed, any of those 16 items. I can just recognize the pattern.
Correct.
So again, it's task specific because yes, if I want to train an Olympic athlete, or if I want to treat a physiotherapy patient, I'm going to need to know more than that. But if I just want to know that she wants to make it easier for herself to bring that box of cat litter down the stairs, I could just tell her, put a little bit of sand in here, bring it down the stairs. When that feels easy, put a little bit more sand, bring it down the stairs. So I don't need to understand anything to accomplish the goal of making her life easier at that one task, other than gradually increase the weight to make your life easier at that one task.
Correct. However, that is one task. That does not mean you understand exercise. That's one task. And that is monkey see, monkey do, which is, while it is a primary form of human learning, it doesn't mean understanding. It means monkey see, monkey do, which is usually
But
done
again,
back.
with regard to understanding, there are, again, like, see, this is where we keep getting stuck now, because there are going to be different levels to understanding, because unless there's always going to be somebody who understands more than you. So at what is the bare minimum that you would?
I mean, I think I've given you 3 definitions now. I mean, I'm starting to.
But within each of your definitions, we've been able, because like, for example, when you were talking about the overhead press, you were talking about how it's not the most optimal for X goal, but depending on
and it damages your body.
But again, see, this is where you are inserting your goal onto the individual, because it doesn't matter. Like for me, I think the flat bench press is a stupid exercise. I don't think it's particularly beneficial for most people unless you're a power lifter who needs that exercise. Regardless of my opinion of that exercise, if somebody comes to me because they want to enter a powerlifting competition, I'm going to, my opinion of whether or not the bench press is a good exercise or not is completely irrelevant. They're coming to me with a very specific goal, and I need to help them accomplish that goal.
Sure.
So with regard to your knowledge of biomechanics, again, your knowledge of biomechanics needs to be pertinent to the amount of information required to help the person achieve the goal. So if all my mother cares about was just bringing that box of cat litter down the stairs and making that task easier, then I don't have a very thorough understanding of exercise, but I know enough to know that that one specific task is going to make that one thing easier for her.
Like, again,
and we could just extrapolate that and keep going one step further. So, okay, now I understand how that one particular task is going to be beneficial, but I don't understand how it is going to, I may not be able to understand anything at all aside from that one pattern. But if that's the only thing that she needs help with, that's really the only thing that I need to understand. So the level of understanding with regard to biomechanics and exercise is only relevant to the person and the goal. And that's kind of my point the whole time. Whereas you're kind of, in one sense, you treat biomechanics like it's an on or off switch where you either know it or you don't. And then in another sense, you kind of state my point where it's dependent on the person in front of you and helping them achieve their goal.
Just real quick, let me see if I can wrap this up, because I get it. Let me just see if I can try to wrap up with a few points maybe that will bring it together. Just let me say them real quick. So number one, for example, I agree, depending on the person in front of you, requires more or less information. Okay, it definitely depends on the person in front of you. If you are training an elite football player, you better be a much better coach than somebody who's training high school football players, right? And you better have more information. You better know more about exercise than that other one, right? I mean, I would hope so anyways. As a professional coach, you should have more information about the whole, everything to do with it. Everything to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's definitely a spectrum. Now, depending on the individual you're coaching, specialized knowledge will be required per individual. So say I am strictly a PT who works on knees, and I'm the best in the world because I've done 70,000 knees, whatever. So I'm the best at knees, and I specialize in knees. And if I have a knee problem, I'm going to go see this guy because that's what he specializes in, knee mechanics, right?
Yeah.
And apply that to a dozen other scenarios with other things, everybody. Just imagine that, okay? My underlying argument is that all of those people, without the basic, what I'm saying, the 10, 16, depending how advanced you want to go, points, which are simple to understand in biomechanics, without that knowledge, number one, you are highly likely to be doing functionally counterproductive things. Number two, you are highly likely to be ineffective. Number 3, you are unable to see like implications for the future based on your current actions. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. I'll leave it at 3. I'll just leave it there. I could give
Okay,
you 2
but
more
within each of those, again, it kind of gets back to the same point that we're arguing, because so you mentioned that you're not going to be as efficient. Again,
I did have
efficiency, that's one of the 3 things, right? So the more knowledge in biomechanics you have,
well,
the
there's one more
more.
thing that just real quick before you start this, because there is just kind of one more piece that I think is kind of important, and that's the, as previously referenced, I'm sorry to bring it up again, but I think this is very important to the conversation. The semantical definition of the words used in my claim, which is if you do not understand exercise, you do not, biomechanics, you do not understand exercise. Now, I fully understand and respect and agree with your opinion about the spectrum of knowledge required to help different individuals. I have no disagreement with that whatsoever. Completely correct.
So here's the thing, though. If by don't understand biomechanics, you mean literally like I'm a 4-year-old who doesn't understand anything whatsoever, then we're not disagreeing. Again, it does come down more to semantics, because
the semantics are very important. I don't think somebody who says they understand exercise should not say that if they do not understand biomechanics, because you literally don't. And when I say biomechanics, I'm referring to at least the basic 10 principles. Better would be the 16. But again, that's my opinion. And furthermore, go ahead, sir.
But with regard to the understanding of the biomechanics, again, it comes down to theory versus practice, because you can, in theory, know absolutely none of the things that you are talking about right now, but just in practice.
But that is understanding exercise. It's not in practice. It's not teaching. It's not coaching. It's not training athletes. It's, do you understand it? I didn't say I was the best coach in the world. I said, I didn't make any of those claims. I never said that. I didn't say implication. I know. I said, if you're claiming you understand exercise and you do not understand basic biomechanics, you're a liar.
But okay, so with regard, though, to forget about the 16, you mentioned the 10. Within each of those 10, again, there's also levels to each of those 10 that one would have to understand. So that's getting down to the heart of it.
That's why I keep saying basic, though. I keep using the word basic intentionally.
But basic, even within basic, there's a 0 understanding, there's 1%, there's 10. So what is the cutoff exactly? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, since this is a debate, I'll phrase it like this. Since it's a debate and we're talking scales anyways, it's a fun point to bring up. Something I deal with regularly, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, this is basically just where people don't know what they don't know, so they overestimate what they know, essentially. Now, the reason I'm bringing this is, the reason I'm bringing this up is just, again, kind of put in perspective the spectrum that we're talking about right now. Now, I'm not referring, if you want to imagine a square that is exercise, the square would be the size of the screen. I'm not talking about that. That's like all the information humanly possible about exercise, every possible field you could list, all known studies, all known science that nobody could ever know. Maybe one of the new.
Here, let me ask you one more clarifying question, actually, because I think this might help us get down to the heart of the issue. How exactly are you defining understand exercise?
Meaning, I'm not, like, I understand exactly the question, but I thought we'd covered that.
Well, so you've listed that there are 10 things that somebody has to know, but like with regard to understanding exercise, what do you actually mean by understand exercise? Because, for example, let's say you take.
I get it. So it goes back to the semantics. So to understand, again, regardless if you know it or not, to understand means literally to comprehend the knowledge about the subject, to understand, to comprehend, to be able to retain the information and then practically use it. Okay, that's what to understand means. Biomechanics is the study of how force, in this case gravity, affects living tissue. Now, I'm not referencing this giant amount of information that is all of exercise. That's way too much for anybody to know. No. I'm not referencing the amount. I'm like here somewhere. I'm not referencing that amount. I'm referencing a pinprick so small you can't see it on the screen. I'm referencing.
Okay, here's the other thing, though, with regard to. So yes, biomechanics involves yeah, force, motion, interaction between load and the body. But understanding exercise, are you earlier on? What I asked you was one of the clarifying questions that I asked you was, are you arguing that biomechanics is necessary, sufficient, or both
Mhm.
in order to
Necessary,
understand
yes.
exercise?
Necessary, yes. Sufficient, not quite.
Okay, so with regard to biomechanics, even if I don't understand things like force, motion, any of that stuff in theory,
Yeah, you don't need to.
if I understand, let's say, fatigue management, programming, tolerance, adaptation, adherence, all of those things,
Sure.
what would make me not actually understand? You get what I'm trying to get at?
I completely understand. Like I think we literally sharing the frustration. I totally understand what you're trying to say. I promise you, I'm trying as hard as I can to communicate my half. I really am. And I know what you mean. I swear to God I do. But when you ask me that question, I mean, I they have to. Okay, so
Because the way that you're
keep it
treating
simple.
biomechanics, it's almost like you're
To me,
treating it as a
to me,
binary requirement
and
for
I understand it.
understanding exercise.
That's what
Whereas
I'm trying to.
I agree that biomechanics is one very important component of exercise understanding. However,
But let me explain the
it
binary.
doesn't necessarily show that biomechanics
Let me
determines
explain the
whether someone
binary.
understands exercise or not, because you can you can not have an understanding of biomechanics but still understand what specific movements do, because one of so with regard to exercise, the definition of exercise is it's a physical activity that is meant to either maintain or enhance either physical fitness, health, function, performance. So if you understand that a specific exercise will achieve a desired outcome without understanding the biomechanical principles behind it, what?
You're missing a key word in your definition that's in the definition. It's in the definition of exercise. Very important word, predictable. Predictable. Predictable changes. The body's adaptation to changes, particularly when it is predictable. If it's not predictable, it's not understood. And if you don't understand biomechanics, exercise is not predictable. It's predictable in the simple sense of if I keep doing this with more weight, I get stronger. It is not, however, predictable in all senses, meaning this is why we get pec tears. This is why we get injuries. This is why we don't get results. This is
See,
why
so
all of
now
this
though we're starting to get into more advanced concepts,
understanding,
because again, it
understanding,
comes down to what exactly
understanding.
is the bare minimum cutoff and what is the threshold for understanding exercise. Because again, at some points you kind of treat it like it's an on or off switch where you either know it or you don't know it, and then at other points you kind of treat it like it's this.
So here's the binary nature. Here's the binary. Binary, it, and I understand. Let me rephrase your position as best I understand it, just to be clean. Um, you can fully understand how to do movements, how to overload the movements, how to get stronger in those movements. You can even completely understand how by doing those particular movements, it makes you better in life and in health. And I would say you don't understand exercise. Now, the reason for that and the reason for the binary is, again, and it's why I want you to understand that I don't really think it's a wishy-washy thing. It is kind of binary. I mean, this is why the whole claim is there. It's binary. You do not understand exercise, binary, on off, if you don't understand biomechanics. And again, the whole reason for that is not only the wording, but the actual nature of the material. So,
but okay, so using your definition though, like with this binary, so with regard to the claim of if you don't understand if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't understand exercise.
Correct.
Then if it truly was a binary where you understand biomechanics or you don't, you understand exercise or you don't, then everyone who understood biomechanics or exercise and everyone who didn't would basically have the same knowledge. Like you're treating it like it's an on or off switch, and then in some aspects you're treating it like they're.
So let me see if I could have. Tell me if this is accurate. No, I can't go back in time, but let me see if I can get you to approve of this. We'll say maybe
Okay.
Semantically. I'm just going to reword my claim. Give me 1 second to, because I want to keep it the same, but I want to add a word and see if I can get you on board with at least that claim, and then we can narrow.
Because like we agree on a lot of things. We agree that understanding biomechanics is important. We agree that most trainers are shit. They don't know what they're doing.
The problem we're getting to is just the definition of how much knowledge is necessary, and the perspective that I'm taking. And it's perhaps a little hard to demonstrate, or I'm doing a bad job of it, but the perspective I'm taking is that it's an extremely small amount of knowledge, a very minuscule amount of knowledge, which if you have this knowledge, it will completely change everything. Now, the reason I keep saying it like that, and the reason it's binary, is because exercise is the body's predictable adaptation to different forces being subjected to it.
So here's the other thing too, is so first of all, we need to agree on the definition of exercise, because right now you're using a different definition than I am.
You want that's fair. You want to use Google or some shit? What?
Well, the definition that I would use for exercise is the one that I already stated. So it would be a physical activity that is meant to either maintain or enhance physical fitness, health, performance, or function. So it doesn't have to, you don't like, so for example,
I pulled it up, and again, there's a reason why, again, this is telling me like this as well, because it's clear. It says movement with intention, not at random. Literally, it's necessary that it is not random. It has intention, and intention and not randomness require understanding. Otherwise, you can't have results. Now, you can have.
Yes. You do need to have an understanding in order, like if you have a specific intent for what you want the exercise to accomplish, yes, you need to understand what that exercise is going to do. However, again, it comes down to different levels. So if I understand that when I do this motion and I go up in weight, I'm going to get better at that motion, and my goal is I want to get stronger at that motion, my level of understanding is sufficient enough for the goal that I have in mind. So while I may not be able to treat a patient with adhesive capsulitis, I may not be able to treat a patient.
We're going in circles again. I totally get it. We're going in circles. I get it. But my whole problem, again, my entire issue with that is that person clearly does not understand exercise. That person understands progressive overload. They understand monkey see, monkey do. Now, I know what you're going to say, that there's levels to it, but this is why I'm telling you it's binary. If you are a personal trainer and you're coaching people, at bare minimum, in my opinion, at bare minimum, you should know this stuff. Now, they don't, but it is what it is. At bare minimum, if you know these things, you might not be good at coaching people or motivating them or whatever. But if you know these things at bare minimum, as long as you're a semi-decent people person, you're going to have so much more knowledge than everyone else. And the reason it's binary.
But we're not disagreeing on that one point.
One second. This is important. Without the binary of that, without the knowledge of biomechanics, and by the way, I'm not talking spectrum. I'm going to keep sticking to my basic 10 claims. Keep it simple. Basic 10 claim, which I teach 10-year-olds. It's simple. Basic 10 claim. That knowledge is easy to acquire, and binary, when you don't have it, you cannot produce consistent, reliable, repeatable results, and you are generally counterproductive and inefficient.
Okay, so again, because right now you said that it is a binary where you either understand it or you don't. Okay, so again, I've been forget about how long I've been training for. I've actually been coaching for 22 years. in order for it to be a binary where you know it or don't, at some point throughout those 22 years, there would have been one specific moment where one day I didn't know exercise, and then one day I did know exercise.
Yep, for sure. Or at least you understood enough about biomechanics to claim exercise. Now, when I say understanding enough, I say the 10 claim, the 10 principles. That's my claim. So say I was on principle number 9. Do I understand exercise? More than most people. Do I understand it? No. How about 10? Do I understand more than most people? Yes. Do I understand exercise? Yes. Comprehensively? No. How about if we take it to 16? Do I understand exercise? Yes. Way better than just about everybody in the world. How about do I understand it completely? No, because as I already mentioned, you are missing bios integrity, you're missing nutrition, all these other things. You're missing all of these other components,
See,
which do not allow you to understand.
Here's the thing, though, where like because you're treating it like a binary, you are saying that at one point you go from like at one point over the course of the last 22 years of my coaching, there would have been one specific day where yesterday I didn't know exercise, and now today I do know exercise. And what I want to pin down is what exactly would have made me go from yesterday not understanding, or even 5 minutes ago not understanding exercise, to right now understanding. Because even without understanding the 10, 16 principles, however many principles you want, I can still, just through practice, be able to achieve consistent results just through experimentation. So for example, let's say I don't understand any of the 16 principles that you understand, but I've been coaching for 20 years. Over the course of 20 years, I could understand when I do X thing, it ends up getting Y result. I may not be able to explain what X thing is or why I was able to achieve Y result, but I can know that doing X thing achieves Y result. Without understanding anything about biomechanics. So
correct. But does that mean that you understand exercise? No, because you cannot explain what is occurring during that movement. You cannot articulate what is occurring during that movement. You have no ability to. You don't yourself know what is occurring during that movement. You just know.
Again, so this comes down to the same argument that we were getting to earlier, because I could easily just make the arguments that, so you mentioned the 16 things that somebody needs to know. Why is it that they need to know those 16 things? Because somebody that knows 24 things could say, until you know these 24 things, you don't understand exercise. And somebody that knows 37 things could say, until you know these 37 things, you don't understand exercise. So why does somebody have to know those 10 specific things in order to understand exercise?
Because unless you're able to articulate those things, and unless you understand them well enough to re-articulate them and explain them to someone, then you yourself have no idea how you are achieving results. You are guessing.